Good evening, everyone. It's Tracy here. It's Tough Love Tuesday, and I'm back. Yes, last week I was gone. I was on vacation, and I forgot to announce I was not going to be here. So, anyway, coming back this week, I've got a wonderful guest with me today, Erin Kerry. Erin is also a certified integrative nutrition health coach, and she's also the owner of Sparkling Wholeness. And I'm really excited to bring her on the show today because of her story. I'm not going to tell much of it, but I'm going to read her bio and everything for you. And then I'm going to let her start talking. So Erin is a certified integrative nutrition health coach and self-proclaimed brain health nerd. She's taught middle school English for 11 years before pursuing her wellness business full-time. She's a mom of 3 adorable kids who I see on Facebook and Instagram all the time. And you're the owner of a nutrition coaching company called Sparkling Wholeness. So, as a survivor of bipolar disorder, Erin knows firsthand how suffering from a chronic illness can infiltrate every area of life. She spent the last 7 years coaching others and learning for herself what holistic health truly means. And that comes from in the form of nutrition of mind, body, and soul. And so Erin wants people to be empowered to be their own health advocate and not be limited by a label or a diagnosis. And I just love your story. Like I said, one thing I learned as well was I was being labeled by a diagnosis, but not being willing to stay in that mode and being willing to learn. I got myself through it. And so please tell us all about your story. What happened with you and what got you where you are today?
Yes. All right. Well, I'll try to keep it as short and condensed as possible.
Just go right ahead. No problem. Just tell your story.
And I'll try not to spin in my spinny chair because sometimes I do that too. But it's like
no worries.
Yeah,
be you.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm used to just recording without video. So I'm like, okay, I'll try to make sure that I am on. So here I am, and I'm excited to share. But yeah, no, really, my story does start from a very young age. I mean, and I think it's important when we look at our own personal health histories to look as far back as possible. And I look at my health history as a young baby, as an infant. I struggled with ear infections that turned into an asthma diagnosis and dealing with all sorts of asthma medications and steroids and lots of antibiotics. And then I remember my earliest memory actually is being held down for allergy testing as a very small child, not understanding why they were poking all of these needles into my back and making me stay still because, that's what you're supposed to do for allergy testing. But it was pretty traumatic. I mean, I was a very sick child. And so, and I'm going to just insert this real fast in the middle of telling my story is if you have not heard of the phrase or the term epigenetics before, it's so important, especially when it comes to mental health, because a lot of times you will hear that, oh, well, it's just genetic. My mom had depression. My aunt has anxiety. So of course I'm going to suffer too. And sure, maybe that factors in a little bit because our genes load the gun. And that's what epigenetics is. Your genes load the gun, but it's your environment that pulls the trigger. And so when I do think about my genetics, that I was predisposed probably to a little bit of mental instability, to struggling with my mental health just based on some family history, I did have all of these environmental factors and triggers that really loaded the gun. And I think the thing that really caused my issues to flare was when I was 9 years old. It was the spring of my 4th grade year, which is a very, just developmentally, you're trying to understand the world at a deeper level. Well, I watched my grandpa, who I was very close to, he died in my front yard. And it was horrendous. He died from anaphylactic shock, speaking of allergies. And so it was very instantaneous, super traumatic. And so that was just another environmental trigger that probably helped kind of push me towards this mental unhealth, this mental instability that I suffered from in the years after, because I really didn't start struggling with my mental health until about 7th, 8th grade. And that's when a lot of the flashbacks came back about watching my grandpa die. And so there's a lot of, trauma that played into that, some PTSD symptoms. But I really did not want to live anymore. And I think that's what's really important for people to understand when we're talking about things like depression. It's not just, suicidal ideation. It's not just that people want to kill themselves. It's that many people, they want to end this discomfort and the pain, and they want to go away and never come back, or just go away and come back when it's all over, when it's all done with. And I think for me, I was struggling so much, not understanding, why I was feeling so low. Why couldn't I get out of bed? Why I didn't have any interest in the activities that I usually loved. As a young teenager, I was involved in all sorts of, sports and cheerleading and drama, theater, I was one of those kids. I wanted to do everything and I loved achieving, and I got a lot of worth from achieving. But all of a sudden those things didn't matter as much to me. And I didn't understand. I had no clue what was going on. So thankfully my parents did start to see me struggling, and they took me to a really good therapist. They took me to a psychiatrist eventually. I was diagnosed with PTSD and depression.
Wow.
So the first thing to do in that kind of a situation for them in that time, this is the 90s, antidepressants were just hitting really hard. And so I was put on my first antidepressant. Well, what some people don't realize about antidepressants, they do have a pretty decent track record, but not everybody is going to improve with antidepressants. Sometimes it makes symptoms worse before it makes them better. Sometimes it just makes symptoms worse and never makes them better. And in my case, they worked here and there, but they started swinging me up too high. So by the time I was 18, I was diagnosed with what they called then manic depressive illness or bipolar disorder. So of course, then I was put on some other medications to stabilize the highs that I was on while still being on my antidepressant. And it just started from there. It was just a cycle of meds and side effects and more meds. And at the same time, I'm like, I don't understand. I'm not sleeping well, or I'm sleeping too much. And I wasn't really, I was a kid. I was just trying to cope the way I could and all I knew to do. And so I didn't eat the best way for me. And I stopped exercising in college because I wasn't playing sports anymore. And things really spiraled downhill fast. So that's a short form. I will say the short version, there is hope at the end of this journey. And that I did, what's interesting is I found myself pregnant my senior year of college. And through that pregnancy, I kind of went into remission from my illness, which is interesting. I've heard that from people with autoimmune illnesses before, but I had to go off my medication just to, have a healthy pregnancy. But I was put back on afterwards. And then I started digging into nutrition and exercise and gut health. And I realized there was so much more to the picture of mental health. And there are so many more tools in the toolbox than I had ever been told about. So, and we can get there, but I'll pause for now because I feel like
you keep talking. No, do not even worry about it. I want your story out. So you go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So one of the first things that I started doing, especially because I was a young mother and wanting to be healthy for my daughter, all of that, is I started exercising. I was like, well, maybe I'll start exercising. That'll make me feel better. It used to, it helped when I was in high school. So I'll try that. That worked. I started changing up my diet, and I was like, gosh, this is interesting. This is making me feel better mentally and physically. But it was really 7 years ago when I started addressing my gut health. I started learning all about the gut-brain connection. And I learned that we produce over 90% of our neurotransmitter serotonin. We produce that in our gut. And so I think that is one reason why for a lot of people antidepressants don't work as well as we would like them to work, because if you don't produce serotonin to begin with, it's really hard to utilize a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which is an antidepressant, because it really does start at the digestion level. And so for me, I also found out that I was predisposed to lacking B vitamins, vitamin D. I was put on a lot of medication. A lot of the things that I had taken had further depleted me of those things that I needed. And so it really was, if I look back again to early childhood, early adulthood, my teen years, it was kind of a recipe for disaster. And I think a lot of people do get caught up in that cycle of, well, I'm taking these things to deal with my symptoms now, just to manage my symptoms now, whether it's antibiotics or, steroids, whatever it is, like we
Mhm.
just do the best we can with what we have. I always say that, but we don't know long term what that's going to cause,
Right.
and one of the things too, I will say, because I need to throw this in there because a lot of women aren't aware of this, the birth control pill can
Mhm.
really negatively impact gut health, can deplete us of B vitamins that we need for neurotransmitter health. And that was another medication that I was put on as a middle school student. And if you look at the studies on birth control use and then antidepressant use soon after, or antidepressant prescription soon after, it's there's a very strong correlation,
Yeah.
to suffering from depression or massive lows and irritability, mood instability after being put on birth control pills. And so that's just something, that I think I need to throw out there, because there are a lot of factors. There's so
Mhm.
many factors at play, not to mention the trauma. Trauma, we store that in our body. And when your nervous system is dysregulated, it affects every
Agree.
single part of your body. And exercise can be great, but even sometimes too intensity of exercise can almost throw us into this fight or flight mode even more. So these are things that I've had to learn to figure out just for myself. So everything that I do as a nutrition coach comes from what I've had to do for myself, because the things that I had been told maybe worked for a little while, but then they weren't. And so we need new tools for mental health, and that's what I feel so passionate about, is we
Mhm.
need to have more information, more tools, because there are a lot of evidence-based treatments that can help. We just don't always make it there when we want our quick fix, just to manage
Right.
symptoms.
Well, and everything you're saying, that's one thing I know, and it was the biggest lesson I had to learn is what how my body handled what I put in my mouth and what I swallowed. I didn't have the connection that it really mattered, I think, because that's, and I'm 54. And so I grew up in the area of time as well, where we just didn't acknowledge that, so much was a calorie was a calorie.
Right.
So, and you heard the stories, well, don't eat those empty calories. But really, I don't think at that time anybody really understood the actual, like you said, the actual effect of our gut and what happens
Mhm.
to our gut, and then what effects happen into our brain. And so I remember just being anxiety ridden,
Yeah.
and I know it now when I eat certain foods, because I finally figured it out that I'm probably going to have about 3 hours of either being really grumpy,
Mhm.
agitated, or very anxious. And whereas I never used to know why I felt like that. And then I would try and eat to resolve that discomfort. And I would do it again and again and again. Like for me, I was the yo-yo dieter, you know, poor body image, poor
Mhm.
self-image, poor, mindset, and like you, it's interesting. I did a lot of things like overcoming it in school with theater, music,
Yeah.
sports, things like that. And so, but um, what I really appreciate with your story, because I know with me, with being pre-diabetic, it sort of makes sense. Yeah, what you eat raises your blood sugar levels, but we need to also realize that it affects our brain, it affects our moods,
Mhm.
all our hormones, and it's tough love Tuesday, everybody. We can either look at it, we just want to keep taking a pill, or can we? Is there something we can do? Because I firmly believe it. If we're super sleuths and we really say, what are these clues that I'm missing? What are the little clues?
Mhm.
You know, did you have when you started doing your work on your gut and revising your foods, what was your mindset when you realized some things were that maybe you loved, that you always thought you wanted, you found out that those were antagonists, that these were making
Ooh.
you actually feel awful? How did you get through that? I know how I got through my process, but how did you get through that process of maybe you had an emotional connection with something, a food item? What did
Mhm.
how'd you get through that part?
That is such a good question, because that has been, I mean, that really is a journey of baby steps, and I think that that's something that people need to hear, because, to your point about the yo-yo dieting before, when I years ago, if I was eating healthier, it's because I was on a diet, and it's because I was trying to perfect my body in some way, which perfecting my body really to me just meant I wanted to change the shape of my body. And guess what? I have the shape of the body that I have, and that's not going to change. And so that's a whole other topic, whole different conversation. But I was only associating salads or greens or whatever with dieting. And so I had a hard time really even wanting to eat those things, because I was like, oh no, does this mean that I can't have things that I like to eat? I thought that healthy foods were not tasty foods, right?
Yes.
And so that was a big step to wrap my head around. And I thought, well, I have to have a recipe. I have to know how to prepare vegetables. I have to know like the right amount of seasonings and the right amount of, olive oil, avocado oil, or whatever, there were all these things same thing with, grass-fed beef. Okay. For so long, I said I didn't like beef. And I realized, did I not like beef, or was it because I was told that beef was fatty?
Yeah.
All that, like it's not a lean protein, right? And so so I had to actually like almost kind of go opposite and reintroduce everything, especially when it comes to just anything whole and processed from the ground, animal proteins that are quality, whatever. I just have had to try it all to go, okay, do I actually like this for me? Or do I not like this because I was told that I'm not supposed to like that? I mean, that's such a hard thing to do. And so I know one thing that I will say that has been hard for me to I still have a hard time coming to terms with this, but gluten in my brain, they're just not BFFs,
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate, because I will say, even a couple weeks ago, I had a period where it's like, oh, it's just a piece of pizza, it's like some really good fancy pizza place, like no big deal. I can handle it, because I do believe that once we start working on healing, we should be able to handle small doses. Our bodies are so amazing and resilient, so we should be able to handle small doses of things if we don't have something like celiac or major food allergies, or really, all of that, huge intolerances, whatever. I feel like I should be able to handle small doses. And in the moment, yeah, maybe I can, but I'm telling you, I started struggling with just some racing thoughts, just some mild anxiety was popping up. And I thought, what is that? And I had to go, what have I been eating? And another thing that fogs up my brain is dairy, and it's so hard, because that can be a comfort food. And I understand that. And there are reasons that dairy and gluten are comfort foods. It's the, is it the gluteomorphin and casomorphin or whatever it is. It's it is kind of like a drug-like substance for us. And so there are reasons for that. But I know for me, it's really important to limit that. And it's not, and I will say, not just for me, for people with mental health issues, there is tons of research and documentation on especially gluten being problematic that goes back to the 1950s and 60s. So this research has been out there for a really long time. So I'm not, just like throwing stuff out there, but that has been hard, and it's just hard to adjust to. And if I see something like, oh, that sounds really good, but it's like, well, gosh, how am I going to feel later? Is it a worth it thing? Like, am I going to be able to sleep tonight? Am I going to be, irritable tomorrow and in a really bad mood? What's it going to do for my hunger hormones? Like there's a lot that goes. Sleep is a big deal for me. Getting proper sleep is important. And if I am eating what I used to eat all the time, which is carbs, carbs, carbs. And I'm not talking about, quinoa either.
No, processed carbs, refined carbohydrates. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that really negatively impacts my sleep. And I used to be a huge sugar addict. Well, that's a gut issue. I think that some of that can be emotional, but it definitely is. I mean, when you are experiencing ridiculous sugar cravings all the time, that's a sign that your gut needs some love, needs some support. So.
Yeah, exactly. And the other aspect, when you don't get enough sleep, if you think about that too, you're going to get a lot of cravings, and you're going to crave sugar. You're going to crave these carbohydrates, because your brain takes a ton of energy to get you through the day. And if, so maybe you want that 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock snack. Well, maybe going to bed at, 10 would be the best thing. And then you don't eat those things that it's craving to try and stay awake for you and stuff, which then populates your gut with icky stuff and makes you feel crappy, and you don't sleep well, and your heart rate goes up in the middle of the night,
Yes.
all that kind of stuff. And I know for me, I did not want to have to change. I didn't want to have to do it. I was so mad at my body that it couldn't just suck it up. I mean, I had a really bad attitude. And I think because I was reading everything, and I couldn't, and I would see the ads, and I saw I'm supposed to feel really good on dairy. Oh, I'm supposed to be eating all this bread.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be doing all these things that they're marketing to me, and my body isn't responding right. So obviously there's something wrong with me. And it took me a while to flip that. Actually, most bodies can't handle what they're selling on TV and all these things like that. And so, I know I went through some grief and loss at some food items, but my brain realizes now, and I think yours does too. Your mind realizes it feels so much better on the other side. It feels so much better, calmer, and all these things on the other side of those food items. So yeah. Now you said something. You have a live protocol.
Yeah. So I just
to tell us about.
Yes, just because I think it's important, just it's it's not really a 4-step protocol, but it's just things to remember if you want to optimize your brain health. I put it in a short acronym that is pretty easy to remember, and it is LIVE, because that's what we want. We want to be living. We want to be in the moment. We want to be mindful of what's happening. And when our brains are dysregulated, when our bodies are dysregulated, causing dysregulation to our brain, it is very hard to be present and mindful in the moment. So I will go over that pretty quickly. I could, without going into too much of detail, but the L for live stands for learn to manage stress. That is so, so important. That has to come first, because if we're not managing our stress, we will always, I think, cave into our cravings. If we are not managing our stress, our emotional triggers, and really looking at what's going on here, it's hard to make any changes that are going to stick. If we are in fight or flight mode, what that does is it switches our brain to where our prefrontal cortex, where we make good decisions, it is offline. It's not happening.
It's not plugged in.
It is not. It is trying to connect. It's doing the old-fashioned internet dial-up, but it is not happening because we are so stressed out. And so, I'm really big on meditation and breath work. That deep nasal breathing that most people do not do. We just spend most of our day with these short, fast breaths, shallow breaths, and it's like it just perpetuates that cycle of fight or flight in our body. It leads to inflammation. So taking some time for stillness, which, I was talking to Tracy before, we have a puppy in my house. And so it is really messy. It's wonderful, but it's causing my sleep to be a little disrupted. I will say my mornings, I don't get the stillness I used to get because I've got somebody nibbling on my toes, so that's hard, but it is so important to find ways to be still, to be present, breath work, mindfulness, anything you can do that you say, like for me, reading fiction. I love reading health books. I love reading about gut health, brain health, all of that. But reading fiction is something that it does calm my breathing, and it puts my mind in a calm, restful place. It doesn't put me in that anxious mode. So finding something that works for you and adding that, making sure you make that a priority, because we have to front load the stress management. We can't start trying to manage our stress after it's already piled up on us. We have to really think of ways to do that first. And so that's what the L is. Okay. And I'll go on to I. I is to identify root causes. And so again, like it could be food sensitivities. That's a big issue for a lot of people. We don't even know, and there are tests that can determine that. And I do, work with that for people as well. But identifying root causes, it could also be something like, hey, maybe you're taking Miralax or some other medication or over-the-counter thing. Maybe that's contributing to some of these mental health issues you're experiencing. Or maybe you can switch to something that's going to target your brain and your digestion, like magnesium. Like that that could be a nice, so there are other root causes. Let's see, food
Mm-hmm.
toxins. Gosh, I mean, if we look at cookware, plastics that we use,
Yep.
fragrances, there are so many things that can disrupt our mental health that we don't
Mm-hmm.
even realize. Detergents,
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
so our world is, there's a lot out there, and it does impact our brain function, and a lot of documentation for that too. I'm not just making it up.
No, I know. And then I think too is realizing too, everyone's body is different too. And
Yes.
so I'm very, very sensitive to toxins in the environment. So I always tell everybody, I'm the canary in the room. I will let you know if
Mhm.
there's formaldehyde in here. I can tell you
Yep.
if there's a bug spray or if someone's been spraying stuff in their lawn,
Yep.
and I get horribly ill around that stuff, and
Mhm.
anxious and all of that,
Yeah,
so
for sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a big, I mean, and the other, there are other things like genetic mutations, like the MTHFR mutation is one that you can't process, you can't convert folic acid into folate. And so maybe
Mhm.
somebody's taking folic acid, their body can't even use it. So they
Yeah.
need to use take a methylfolate. So just looking
Mhm.
at what is actually going, these are your
Yep.
body. And this is what I want to make sure people understand. Anxiety, depression, all these symptoms, it's your body telling you something's going on.
Yep.
Like there's an imbalance somewhere, whether in the
Yeah.
internal environment, physically, because it is a physical illness, or maybe
Mhm.
it's an external thing that's going on. Maybe there was a trauma, all of those
Yep.
things can
Yeah.
impact that as well. So that's important. The V stands for variety. Add variety to your diet. That's so important for our gut microbiome, is to be adding
Mhm.
in a lot of variety, not having the same thing all the time, because our body can create more food sensitivities sometimes when we are eating the same thing all the time. And that has happened to me in the past. So I'm constantly trying to change up my routine, add variety. And then the E, oh, and sorry, I will add there, is that I really do try to get myself and people I work with to aim for 20 to 25 veggies in a week, if possible.
I love that.
It's not as
Mhm.
hard as it sounds if you really break it down. I mean, I'm in Texas and we eat salsa like with a spoon, and that has a whole bunch of fresh vegetables in it. So that's one way to do it. And
Yeah.
then the last one, E, stands for exercise your body and your brain. So we don't want to just think about just exercise body, because that's important. But again, it goes back to stillness. Yoga is a great way to do both. I'm a big fan of that.
Mhm.
And staying mindful, staying in the present. So I'll stop there because I know we're going to run out of time.
No, you're good. I just was writing these down, and I'm gonna see if I can show them. Look at that. I just put them
Nice.
at the bottom.
I love
So,
that.
yeah, so, no, you're great, and, so I think that is, again, Eh, and you and I've talked in the past, and we both have the same analogy of our body is our friend. Our body is our number one teammate, and I wrote
Yes.
about that in my book. And,
Yes.
and if we can, instead of looking at our body as like an enemy when it's talking to us or it's giving us a symptom, it's just needing to be heard. And sometimes hearing it can be a bit challenging, but and the process of figuring out why something's going on can be challenging, but it's so worth the work. It's worth the time. It's really worth the studying. And again, I'll tell everybody, I didn't want to have to do it.
Yeah.
I wanted someone else to just tell me. I want to be able to go to the doctor and just have them tell me. Well, sometimes we need to do the work, and the reward is so great on the other side. And so with that, having gone through what you've gone through, and, what do you feel like today? I mean, how is your energy different? How is your mindset different, compared to where you were before?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, and I think my brain is clear. That's the best way to explain it, is that I
Mhm.
don't have the fog I used to have. And again, how much did hormones contribute, and my brain just developing contribute? How much did the wrong medications contribute? I mean, I have been, and this is not something I tell people to do without the supervision of a medical practitioner. Like, I'm not, but I have been off of medication for going on, it'll be 7 years in December. That's a really long
Congratulations.
time. I know that's an anomaly. So again, I'm not saying to go hop off meds. That is absolutely probably the most dangerous thing you could do is just go
Yeah.
out and it's cold turkey. There are a lot of risks associated with that. So there's a weaning process that can be done, and you need a huge support team for that. So I will say,
Yeah.
I never ever recommend that without support. But my brain is clear, and I do,
Yeah.
you know, I'm always going to have periods of goal directed activity because that's me. That's my personality. And I might have periods where I'm just exhausted and I'm tired and I want to rest. That doesn't mean I'm having a depressive episode. And so what
Mhm.
used to be this, I don't know if you can see in the screen there, what
Mhm.
used to be like really extreme up and down has now just been little waves that I feel like is okay. I can feel emotions and lean into those and go,
Yeah.
"Oh, what's going on right now?" Instead of going, oh no, something, I'm about to have an episode. My brain's going to do that. I'm going to be out of control to, you know, like, and now it's just
Mm.
like, okay, body,
Mhm.
what are you telling me? You know, my
Right.
body's on my side trying to help me figure this out. And so, you know, our bodies are always trying to find balance. It's that
Yeah.
homeostasis that we all strive for. So
Yeah.
I try to lean into that and if I need to take a step away from commitments and things, I do that. I know my limits, I know my boundaries, but it has taken, like you said, I've had to do some hard work to get there. And I'm
Mhm.
constantly processing and reading. Journaling is a big thing for me too. I need to mention that. You know, I have to be in my feelings. I can't medicate
Mhm.
as far as, and I can't medicate by things, right? I'm not just talking about medicating by medication. I can't medicate on food, on people
Mhm.
or activities. You know, I can't run it away. Like, I have to be all in the present and be with my body. And that's kind of what's really helped me the most.
Yeah, and I'm listening to your story and comparing to mine, and I know if I went back to Tracy 10 years ago, she wouldn't know who I am today. She would have totally stressed out, thinking, "I've gotta get there." I mean, it's
Yeah.
funny. I just had this anxiety pop up in my gut when I put that mindset back on of who she was and who I was.
Mhm.
It's too big, it's too much, I can't do
Mhm.
it. I think, and you can add on to this too, for everybody, it was a small step journey, and it was ups and downs and learning and
Mhm.
back and forth and failure and wins and experiencing learning who I really was. So, when you and I talk about this for everybody is it's your journey, it's your path, and if you can enjoy learning about yourself,
Mhm.
good and bad. Some of us don't wanna see where we are, but again, I'm so grateful that I had the courage to at least step into it and go through what I went through. So again, with you, can you add on to that as well for anybody watching this that might think this is too something they can't do? What would you say as well?
I would say, yeah, start smaller than you even think you should start, you know, because I think the problem with a lot of programs and diets and, you know, all these things is that it's this huge, like, okay, throw out all this stuff and start fresh. And it really, if you think about our brains, again, if our bodies are on our side, right? Our brains want to survive. And if you're throwing that much information and that many changes, well, you have to do this, your brain is going to go, nope, what's the easy way out? Let me take the easy way out, and that's what I'm going to do. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so do as the smallest thing, like, for example, for brain health, you know, if I could just give one way to
Mm,
start for anybody,
yes.
it really would be throw out the vegetable oils in your pantry, get rid of anything that's vegetable oil, corn oil, soybean oil,
Mhm,
canola oil. Oh, I see, and it's in everything, but really just start
mhm.
looking at those, because I think that we have seen such an increase in mental illness and issues with mental health. And I do think a lot of that has to do with the way our food is made.
Yeah,
And the whole vegetable oil generation, it's not working out for us. So
yeah.
olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, big fan of those. Even if you can tolerate it, grass-fed butter, ghee, just Nourish your brain with good fats. I was never told that. Never, ever, ever. Or an omega-3 oil, fish oil supplement is also helpful. So, something like that, that's like, oh, I can do that. No problem. I can do that. And it's like, now it's all in my pantry and I don't even have to think about it. Start there. Little tiny baby changes. Add a new vegetable this week, and see what happens, because it does get overwhelming if you're like, oh, I have to do all of this. Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. That's hard.
Yeah. And like, I better be done and I better look a certain way in 90 days, So,
right.
So the thing that hit me too, and I know we got to go here, but it was interesting when I was recovering from, I had Achilles tendonitis in both my Achilles. And so it was like 18 months of trying to get over this, and walking retore them, everything. And so part of my mind was like, there's just no way. I may as well not even do it. It's going to take forever. And I finally said, well, if I was an athlete, or if I was somebody that was, not injured, what would they be doing? So I was like, if I just mimic that, maybe, in a similar way. So I took small steps. I just started small, went out walking for a few minutes and came back. And then I got a little stronger and went out again, and then I came back. And then one day I thought, maybe I can run a little bit, So I tried running a little bit, and then I came back home. And it was just this little process. And so you can do that with anything. You can just say, I'm going to start small and that's a win. You don't have to go out and go all out, and then your brain will buy in. It'll say, yeah, okay, we can do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And pretty soon you're doing it without even realizing you're doing it. Yeah.
So like Erin said, pick something small. I love the idea of healthy fats. Love that idea. Thank you so much for that information. So how do they find you? I know you've got a great phenomenal Instagram page. So tell us how everyone can find you.
I'm on Instagram at Sparking Wholeness, and I'm also, my website is sparkingwholeness.com. My podcast is also called Sparking Wholeness. And my Facebook page is Sparking Wholeness Integrative Nutrition. So yeah, that's the main way. Or you can just search my name, Erin Kerry. I think there is somebody that works for NASA whose name is Erin Kerry. So I'm so sorry. Erin Kerry for
not you.
Yeah, not that one. That would be cool, but that's not me. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I hate to go. It always goes so fast. And I've really appreciated you staying up late to go live with us here on the Pacific Coast. And one more tidbit. I'm going to try and get one more out of you. Last little tidbit of advice for everyone before I sign us off.
You know what I didn't get to say? It's my favorite thing to say that I want to remind anybody watching is a body in stress will not digest. So again, if you cannot handle your stress, if you're not dealing with trauma, chronic stressors that you can manage or get rid of, or deal with somehow, get some help to do that, because otherwise your digestion's not going to happen and you're not even going to create the neurotransmitters that you need for mental health. So that is really important. Have to throw that out there.
The body in distress does not digest. Love it. Okay. Erin, thank you again for being on. It was such a pleasure. And take care, everybody. Tough Love Tuesday is closing for tonight. Talk to everyone soon. Bye.